The movie begins by showing a mother and her little girl named Maan and Anna. They didn't have any other family around, like a dad or brothers or sisters. They were wanderers, always on the move from one place to another. They didn't have a car or anything fancy, so they walked everywhere they went. Anna was just 7 years old, and she had never known what it was like to have a proper home or a dad. Life had been tough for them ever since Anna was born. They didn't have enough food, a place to call home, or even the basic things most people have. But Maan, the strong and loving mom, never gave up hope. She told Anna that their journey would lead them to a man named Jason, who was Anna's real dad. They were searching for him all these years because they believed he would bring happiness into their lives. Maan always told Anna that the end of their journey was a city called Mississippi, where Jason was born. She made Anna believe that once they found him, everything would get better and they would finally be a real family. During this time, they managed to get by asking for help from others and sometimes taking things they needed, even though Maan felt really bad about it. She knew it wasn't right, and she wouldn't have done those things if they weren't so desperate, especially when it involved Anna. When they got close to Mississippi, Maan really wanted Anna to experience what it's like to sleep in a proper bed. So she decided to spend their remaining money on a cheap motel room. But the money they had left wasn't enough for food for the next couple of days. So Maan had to think hard to figure out how to make some more money the right way. Then something unexpected happened. Maan saw some women offering their services to truck drivers, and it gave her an idea. She thought maybe she could do the same thing to earn some money, so she left Anna alone for a little while, hoping to get a truck driver's attention. But instead of getting a driver's attention, a police officer came by and got suspicious about what she was doing. The officer made her get into his car to ask her questions at the police station. She kept telling him about her daughter back in the room, but the policeman didn't seem to care and left her there. But it turned out he was lying, and he didn't take her to the police station at all. Instead, he took her to a quiet place under a bridge and did something really wrong. He made her do things she didn't want to do inside the police car, and after a while, he told her not to get dressed. He called 2 other police officers to come there and do bad things to her too. Maan felt trapped because she was afraid of being taken to the police station and leaving her daughter alone. So she reluctantly agreed to do what they wanted. But when the police officer was distracted, Maan, feeling desperate, bravely grabbed his gun from the front seat and shot him, killing him. Meanwhile, back at the motel room, Anna realized her mom was missing and started crying. She couldn't go anywhere because the door was locked. When Maan returned, she held her dear daughter tightly, and the crying just got louder. Now let's switch to another place where there's a man named Russell. He just got out of prison after being there for 7 years because of a terrible car accident that happened a long time ago. In that accident, a young man lost his life, and Russell has been feeling guilty about it ever since. Now, Russell is back in his hometown, Mississippi. When he arrived, a guy named Larry and his younger brother attacked him right away. It turns out that the young man who died in the accident was Larry's son. When Russell got to his dad's house, they talked outside. Russell told his dad how he couldn't stop feeling guilty, even after all those years in prison. The memory of that accident haunted him every day. Russell's dad realized he needed some time alone, so he told him to stay at their old house in the city and even gave him a hunting rifle for protection because Larry was still mad about what happened 7 years ago. Russell couldn't sit still at home, so he went to a bar for a drink, but it was too crowded and noisy there, and it made him feel uncomfortable. So Russell needed some time alone, so he went back outside, not sure where to go. He parked his car on the side of the road and started showing signs of a condition called guilt complex. It's when you always feel guilty or like you'll mess up even before you do anything. Because he seemed a bit odd, a police officer named Boyd stopped him. It turns out Boyd was Russell's childhood friend. Even though he had to check Russell's car because of the rules, he found the illegal hunting rifle. But since they were old pals, Boyd gave him a warning and told him to go home. Back with Maan and Anna, they decided to find a shelter or somewhere for homeless people to stay. Maan asked the person in charge if there was any work she could do. They pointed her to a nearby cafe that needed a dishwasher. Meanwhile, Larry was at Russell's house, waiting for him to come back. But since Russell hadn't shown up yet, Larry got really mad and started smashing the door and windows with a crowbar. Mabon was working at the cafe, and she loved spending time there with her little daughter. But one day, when she got back from work, she got really scared because her stuff was missing. And even worse, there was a police officer's gun in her things, which was proof that she had done something really bad. She hadn't gotten rid of it for some reason, so she had to sneak into the attendant's room to grab the gun. That meant she and Anna had to leave the shelter in a hurry. They ran as far away as they could to avoid getting caught by the attendant. Right when Russell was leaving the bar, Mabon pointed the gun at him and asked him to drive them as far as possible. During the trip, they had to stop, and that's when Russell easily took the gun away from her. But because he was a decent person, he didn't just kick Mabon out of the car or call the cops right away. Instead, he asked her who she was, where she was going, and who the gun belonged to. In a quiet spot, Mabon agreed to share her story, admitting that she didn't really know where they were headed. The only reason they kept moving was because of Anna. As for the gun she had, Mabon gave a detailed explanation, and Russell didn't have much to say about it since the police officer had it coming. When asked about Anna's dad, Mabon said he had passed away 7 years ago. This made Russell even more sympathetic towards her. Now let's talk about Larry, who went to see his youngest son at his ex-wife's place. His marriage had fallen apart because he started drinking heavily and being violent towards his wife. It all began when his oldest son was killed by Russell. So it's no wonder Larry hated Russell, not just for killing his son, but also for ruining his family. To make a long story short, the next morning came, and Russell took Mabon and Anna to his dad's house, where they could stay. They got to sleep in a barn that had a bed, which made Anna really happy. Mabon could finally have some peace of mind now that Anna had a place to live and a good environment, especially since Russell's dad was so kind and welcoming. He even invited Anna to go fishing with him, and it felt like Mabon had a new family. Meanwhile, Larry was at his youngest son's game, drinking beer, which made his ex-wife really mad. He briefly talked to his son and tried to take him for a walk, but his son felt uncomfortable because his dad was drunk. This led to Larry losing control, and the police had to step in to restrain him. After getting out of prison, Larry, along with his brother, visits his son's grave to pay his respects and leaves some coins as a gift. It shows that Larry isn't a bad person, he just needs someone to listen to him. But his ex-wife and his son are already fed up with him, so Larry has to deal with things on his own without thinking about the consequences. Now, let's go back to Russell and Mabon. They're having a deep talk about their lives. When Russell starts sharing his side, he tells the story of what happened 7 years ago. He had a big argument with his girlfriend, and he was drinking while driving. There was a couple in the middle of the road, and their car was parked without any lights on. Russell, still drunk, didn't have time to stop, and there was an accident that killed the young man trapped under the car. It turns out that the couple was Mabon and Jason, Larry's eldest son, so it's clear that all their problems started with a series of mistakes. Mabon must be feeling a lot of anger right now. But since everything happens for a reason, including her meeting with Russell, Mabon can only accept it and asks Russell not to drink on the streets anymore. With everything settled, Russell asks Mabon to throw the gun into the water because keeping it will only cause more trouble for her as evidence. The next morning, Boyd came to see Russell because he got a report about their fellow police officer being shot. The shelter attendant mentioned a woman named Mabon who had a gun in her bag, so the police suspected she might be the one who shot their colleague. Russell had been hanging around the area where the shooting happened and had disappeared for 2 days. Boyd, being a friend, just wanted to know if Russell had seen Mabon. Even though the police were looking for Mabon, Russell acted like everything was okay. Meanwhile, Mabon and Anna seemed happier with their new family. One day, Boyd, still suspicious, thought Russell's dad might be hiding something. So he went into the barn where Mabon and Anna were resting. They quickly climbed up to the attic when Boyd tried to go up and check. Russell's stepmother caught on and threatened to report Boyd for trespassing. This made Boyd even more suspicious, as they both tried to get him to leave. If there was nothing to hide, Russell's dad and stepmom would have stayed calm. So Boyd went straight to Russell's house to find out the truth, but Russell kept saying he didn't know anything about the woman they were looking for. Realizing that Mabon was in danger, Russell rushed back to his father's house to take Mabon away from the city. He told Mabon that if she cared about her daughter, she had to go alone without bringing Anna. It was tough, but eventually, Mabon agreed to go far away until things calmed down. At the same time, Larry is getting more and more frustrated and can't think straight. He blames Russell for everything that's gone wrong in his life. So, Larry decides to hide in Russell's house and use a crowbar to hurt him. Just when Russell and Mabon show up to get supplies for her long journey, Larry is all set to attack. But he accidentally hits Mabon and knocks her out. Russell acts fast, and they start fighting. Unfortunately, Larry finds the rifle Russell had hidden under the mattress and tries to use it. Just in the nick of time, Russell's dad arrives and shoots Larry in the side. He tells Larry to stay calm because he's going to call an ambulance. But Larry, not thinking clearly, decides to drive off on his own, heading to his ex-wife's house to see his son. Both of them are panicking and call 911. But because Larry is drunk, he can't think straight. So he gets in his car and has a crash that ends up killing him. Meanwhile, Russell is at the hospital and gets Mabon to the medical staff right away. Soon after Mabon gets treatment, Boyd shows up. He wants to know what really happened. Russell is ready to tell him the whole story, as long as Boyd listens not as a cop, but as a friend. He confesses that Mabon was the one who killed the police officer and begs Boyd not to arrest her. Russell, who has been haunted by guilt for 7 years, finally finds a way to make things right. He decides to take responsibility by offering the bullet from the police officer as proof that he did it. Instead of making his old friend a suspect in the shooting, Boyd, who cares about Russell, has a different idea to solve the case. He suggests putting the bullet in Larry's body, which is still in his car. That way, the police will think Larry was the one behind the recent shooting. In the end, Russell can finally find peace after helping Mabon and Anna. They all agreed to stay at his father's house with their stepmom. Russell realizes that making mistakes and facing failures that lead to guilt is part of growing up and gaining wisdom. So, the moral of the story is if you ever find yourself in a crazy mess involving family drama, mistaken identities, and wrong crowbars, just remember that sometimes the best way to solve your problems is to switch bullets and blame it on the car crash-prone guy. Life's a roller coaster, so buckle up.